Terrifying forbidden tapes, 13 sinister VHS that revealed a haunted reality beyond understanding. Rebecca had never believed in ghosts. Not until that fateful night. The flickering images from the grungy tape warped her living room, transforming it into something sinister. She could practically hear the sinister whispers of long-forgotten horrors echoing off the walls. They sank into her veins, a chill creeping through her bones as shadows danced across the cluttered corners. Surrounded by the familiar chaos of the small apartment in suburbia, dread never felt so close, so suffocating. As a single mother fighting to provide for her 8-year-old son, Leo, Rebecca needed solace. Every evening, she and Leo would huddle together on the faded couch, a primordial fortress against the world outside their door. The colorful roar of children playing in the cul-de-sac faded into a haunting background hum, shifting into a low ominous buzz the moment she pressed play on that tape. Its label had vanished like a ghost. All she had was an instinctual curiosity, an eerie whisper urging her to discover its contents. The images bled to life. Grainy scenes of life spun out like an old film reel. Joy, laughter, families together. She felt an ache of familiarity. But soon, the mirage shattered. Faces twisted, smiles turned to anguish, innocence dragged into darkness. Everything's fine, she told herself as foreboding feelings clawed at her gut, but she couldn't shake the uncertainties. Leo's laughter grew softer, more distant from her heart. Something about the shadows moving in the corners felt too real. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the credits rolled, something moved through their neighborhood. She noticed the way her neighbors' smiles became strained, the laughter of children tinged with something darker. They were still the same well-intentioned souls who waved at her from across the road, but a shadow loomed behind their friendly facades. Conversations turned sharp, glances became laden with fear. It felt like the tapes were unraveling a once cozy community, exposing grotesque truths hidden beneath the surface. Night after night, Rebecca succumbed to the morbid allure of the tapes. Each one revealed whispers of betrayal, friendships turned to ash, and dark secrets spiraled around her. Leo clung tighter to her side, an innocent puppet unknowingly drawn into the web. His eyes shone with morbid fascination, as if discovering a terrifying wonderland hidden behind the guide of mundane life. Every dark twist and ominous turn tapped into her deepest fears, revealing her neighbors' concealed identities that now haunted her sleep, and as if the nightmares on screen weren't enough, she began to see shadows darting past the windows always just out of sight. A whisper through the thin curtains, an echo in the unlit corners of her mind. They aren't good people, she thought, adrenaline coursing through her like ice water. Each creak of the floorboard sent her heart racing. The boundary that once made her feel secure was fraying, unraveling as the boundaries of storyline and reality blurred. The grip of fear tightened around her throat. What had she invited into her home? The sinister specter looming in her mind told her the truth was lurking out there, maybe right next door. As she turned to Leo, who remained entranced by the screen, an unsettling feeling wrapped around her heart. A shadow flickered past the window, a darkness that made her blood run cold. Every instinct screamed for her to run, to protect Leo from the unfathomable truths waiting just outside. How deep did the deceit in her community run? And the most chilling question of all loomed above her, was there any escape at all? The clock chimed midnight, its sound unsettlingly loud in the oppressive darkness. Rebecca sat glued to the couch, the television casting flickering pale light. Leo had finally fallen asleep, his innocent face framed by shadows that danced along the walls. She stifled a shiver, feeling the chill of the room wrap around her like a tightening noose. The last tape had revealed something that made her stomach churn: a neighbor disappearing without explanation, a dark figure lurking near the children's playground. She could sense it, as if the very air in her home had shifted, thick with invisible threats. The horrors she had watched were turning into echoes throughout her quiet suburban street. Closing the tape case, she noticed her hands trembled, wanting to cleanse herself of the darkness that had seeped in. Outside, wind rattled the branches of a nearby tree, and she flinched at the sound. She rose, moved toward her window, and peered out. The familiar street was cloaked in shadows. The houses loomed like silent sentinels, watching her. Rebecca's heart raced, the distrust eating away at her. It was as if the walls of her neighborhood had begun to lean in, suffocating her with their stillness. Then she saw it. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Across the street, her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, flitted through her yard, moving with a diluted urgency. She bent low, looking over her shoulders as if expecting something sinister to spring from the darkness. Rebecca's breath hitched. This was the same woman who had brought cookies when Leo first moved in. Now, the familiar face seemed twisted, a mask of fear. What was she hiding? Mommy? Leo's sleepy voice broke the silence, pulling her back into the moment. She turned, masking her worry with a smile, but the weight of dread burrowed deeper. Just checking outside, sweetie. Go back to sleep. He nodded and snuggled back into the couch, blissfully unaware of the terror brewing in the night. She couldn't afford to let him see her fear. As she continued to watch, a series of figures began to stir in the neighborhood. More neighbors appeared. Their movements were unnatural, as if they were puppets controlled by unseen strings. They gathered near the cul-de-sac, whispering, casting furtive glances toward her home. Something was broken between them, no camaraderie remained. It was a conspiratorial huddle, a dark undertow sweeping through her once peaceful community. Rebecca felt a sickening niggle in her gut. They were talking about her, she was sure of it. Each whisper scraped against her nerves as she squinted to catch snippets. Words like "the tapes" and "protect ourselves" leached into her ears. It wasn't just her mind playing tricks, her neighbors were embroiled in a sinister plot, one that threatened to consume them all. She turned quickly, glancing back toward Leo, then back to the eerie gathering. With mounting horror, she realized she had to leave the house, but take Leo where? The outside world had transformed into a living nightmare. Shadows from the tape merged with the figures of the neighbors, and the sanctuary of her home was becoming a cage of fear. Her heart pounded as she moved silently to Leo. "Wake up," she whispered, urgency bubbling in her chest. "We need to go. Now." But as she gently shook him, a loud crash echoed outside. It shattered the stillness of the night like glass. The neighbors turned, eyes wide with terror. They knew now that the darkness was upon them. What had she awakened? The tapes had unleashed something far worse than simple ghosts. As she rushed to grab Leo's hand, the air grew thick with dread. Outside, a figure emerged from the shadows, stalking toward her home. Her heart sank as she recognized a familiar face turned against her. Rebecca, the voice slithered through the darkness, chilling her to the core. She recoiled, the shadows of her own life closing in. How could she escape this unraveling nightmare? And just how deep did this sinister plot run? Rebecca's breath quickened as the figure stepped into the wash of moonlight filtering through the clouds. It was Mrs. Thompson, but she was not the woman Rebecca remembered. Her eyes were wild, darting in every direction, almost pleading for help, yet they glinted with a malevolence that froze Rebecca in place. "Go back inside, Rebecca." Mrs. Thompson's voice had lost its warmth, replaced by an urgency that felt almost frantic. "They're coming for you, and you need to protect him." The shadows stirred behind her, distorting her features into a grotesque mask she couldn't comprehend. Rebecca wanted to scream but didn't. She pulled Leo closer to her, her heartbeat drumming like a frantic warning. "What do you mean, they're coming? What are you talking about?" The words rushed from her lips, desperation clawing at her throat, but Mrs. Thompson was already turning away, her laughter echoing hauntingly through the night air. "You shouldn't have watched them. You opened the door." And with that, she dashed back toward the gathering of neighbors, leaving Rebecca with a knot of dread twisting tighter in her stomach. What did she mean? Leo murmured sleepily, still half asleep. He seemed unaware of the horror enveloping them. Nothing, sweetie. Just stay close to me, Rebecca whispered, her eyes darting back to the cul-de-sac. The group of neighbors, now oddly synchronized, stepped closer together as if forming a dark circle, heads bowed in an eerie homage to some unseen force. Panic welled inside Rebecca. They were plotting, she was certain of it. The terror in Mrs. Thompson's eyes lingered, a warning she couldn't ignore. Suddenly, a shrill scream pierced the night. The sound was raw, laced with desperation. It's where the others had skirted away, melding into the inky blackness cloaking the corners of their street. Rebecca turned toward the sound. Her neighbors, one by one, staggered into the light, contorted faces twisted in agony. They weren't just afraid. They were victims of something larger and more malign than she could comprehend. Mommy. Leo's voice quivered, bringing her focus back to him. She felt her heart tear with fear for her child. I won't let anything happen to you, she assured him, her voice firm yet trembling. But deep inside, she felt the ground beneath her crumbling. It was suffocating. In the distance, she could hear someone chanting low and ominous, words she couldn't understand. Each syllable was a brick, forming walls around her, closing in tighter, pushing her toward despair. Rebecca turned decisively. We have to leave, right now, she urged, pulling Leo toward the door, but he resisted. Wait. I want to see. He said, eyes wide with innocent curiosity. For a moment, Rebecca felt the tug of a child's wonder battle against the rising tide of horror. No. The word burst out, more guttural than she intended. We can't. We have to go. As they rushed past the window, she caught sight of shapes moving, swift and fluid. The neighbors. They were circling, a dark whirlwind, their bodies contorting and shifting like puppets in a sinister dance. No one seemed to take notice of her frantic silhouette behind the glass. Rebecca turned back toward Leo. We're going out the back, she hissed, glancing around for an escape route. She had to act swiftly, time was bleeding away. The back door creaked open, sending splinters of fear shooting down her spine. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to stay inside the suffocating walls of the house. But this was not the sanctuary it had been. It was a cage. Hold my hand, she instructed, gripping Leo's small palm tightly. They stumbled into the night, cold air rushing over her skin like icy fingers. When she looked back, the dark figures were gone, but the chanting remained a present hum in the air, echoing off the shadows. Then a hand touched her shoulder, sending electric shockwaves through her body. It was Mrs. Thompson again, but this time, her face was blank, devoid of emotion. Where do you think you're going? Rebecca's heart stopped, paralyzed by the dread swirling in her mind. She tightened her grip on Leo and took a small step back, a silent plea etched upon her features. Help us, she whispered, but the words felt weak against the overwhelming tide closing in. That moment of haunting stillness, Rebecca understood they weren't going to let her leave. Not until the truth was revealed, and she could already feel the gut-wrenching certainty that the truth was more horrifying than she could imagine. What were the sacrifices her neighbors had made? And what were they truly protecting her from? As the night deepened and the chanting grew louder, a new terror unfurled in her gut. They knew something she didn't, and whatever it was coming for them all. Help us, she whispered again, more desperately this time. Mrs. Thompson couldn't be serious. It felt like the air was thickening, suffocating Rebecca, and the once familiar faces around her twisted in her mind into nightmarish forms. Mrs. Thompson moved closer, and the darkness around her seemed to swell, an encroaching tide of shadows. You have to understand, Rebecca, they're not just neighbors anymore. They accepted the darkness. Her voice crackled like brittle leaves in the wind. Rebecca's heart raced as desperation clawed at her throat. What darkness? What did they do? The chanting surged, harmony entwined with madness, swallowing her words, drowning her thoughts. Leo clung to her leg, eyes wide, innocent yet frightened. The combination of his small hand in hers gave her a flicker of strength, but fear seeped back in like poison through a wound. They weren't safe. Mrs. Thompson suddenly recoiled, her expression twisting back into that frantic urgency. You don't want to be part of this. You have to go. In that split second, Rebecca seized her chance. She tugged Leo along, adrenaline surging as they pushed past the suffocating mass of neighbors who had once been friendly faces but now seemed like statues animated by something utterly sinister. Where? Leo asked, stumbling to keep pace, and all she could think of was the park at the end of the street, a barely remembered sanctuary. They darted into the shadows of the yard next door, the cold grass a welcome sensation on Rebecca's bare feet. She marveled at how quickly night had taken hold, blanketing everything in oppressive darkness. Behind her, the chanting echoed louder, blending with the rustling leaves, and it made her skin crawl. Then, suddenly, she felt it. Just like before, a thick, heavy weight pressing against her mind. The air shimmered with the reverberation of unearthly forces. Each breath felt like an act of defiance. "Mommy, I can't hear it." Leo's voice broke through her focus, and panic flashed in his eyes. "The voices, where did they go?" "They're not gone. They're close." "We have to stay quiet, Leo," Rebecca whispered fiercely. But Leo's gaze was fixed behind her. "Mommy, look." She turned, dread deepening in her gut. The neighbors stood at the edge of the yard, forming a line like silhouettes against the moonlight, their heads tilted as if listening to something beyond her reach. Their eyes gleamed with a cold spark, hunger, or perhaps something worse. "Rebecca!" Mrs. Thompson shouted, her voice a breathy whisper on the wind. "You can't escape what you've seen. You're a part of this now." Something deep in Rebecca's chest broke at the words. "No!" She cried out, the defiance igniting a flicker of hope. "We will leave. You can't have us." She grabbed Leo's hand tighter and they broke into a sprint. The trees blurred into a dark tunnel as they hurried toward the park, low branches clawing at her hair, pulling at her clothing. Except the park didn't feel safe anymore. The shadows moved like tendrils around them, and the sound of chanting grew nearer, pulsing with a life of its own. "Mommy, it hurts." Leo's yelp sliced through her. She didn't dare look down, afraid of what she might find. "Keep running, Leo. We're almost there." She gasped, her lungs burning, but as the park came into view, she noticed something that made her heart freeze. All the swings were moving, swinging back and forth as if pushed by invisible hands, and the slides glistened ominously in the pale light. Each creak echoed a promise of something lurking, waiting for the moment they stumbled into its grasp. "Mommy, I don't like it here," Leo whimpered. Rebecca's mind raced. They were trapped. The neighbors' chants harmonized into a horrible symphony, growing more frantic, unstoppable. "Mommy, look." Leo pointed ahead, breath hitching. There, illuminating the park's dark corners, stood another figure, silhouetted against the moonlight, a tall shadow, whispering in the night. Her heartbeat drummed a frantic rhythm. "Run, Leo." She screamed, but before she could move, the figure turned its gaze toward them, and Rebecca's blood turned to ice. The face was familiar. "Why did you come here?" Mrs. Thompson's voice emerged, soft yet chilling. "You're supposed to be one of us now." Panic surged through Rebecca as she realized the vertiginous truth. There was no escaping the horror that had been woven around them. They were too deep now, exposed to a reality that shouldn't exist. What kind of terrible choice awaited them? As the shadows closed in, Rebecca felt the grip of dread tighten on her heart. They weren't just here to watch anymore. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the disturbing reality unfolded before them. The neighbors, those familiar faces twisted into grotesque masks of hunger and desire, stepped forward, their movements synchronized like marionettes on invisible strings. Mrs. Thompson beckoned with an outstretched hand, a smile more sinister than comforting, urging Rebecca and Leo to join the dark gathering. "Join us, Rebecca," she crooned, the words laced with an unsettling sweetness. "You are one of us now. You belong here." Rebecca felt herself wavering, doubt creeping in like the encroaching shadows. What did that mean? What had they accepted? But she clung tight to Leo's hand, the warmth of his small palm a reminder of what she had to protect. "No. I want to let you take us," she shouted, her voice quaking yet defiant. The chanting swelled, a horrid symphony that reverberated in her bones. She could feel the pressure building, almost palpable, as if the very air thickened with their collective will. The other parents from the neighborhood advanced, their faces a canvas of furrowed brows and wild eyes, eyes that sparked with something unholy. "Run!" she screamed, dragging Leo forward. They dashed toward the park, but the swings creaked ominously, their rhythm unceasing, an uninvited lullaby. It felt like the world was closing in, with dark tendrils creeping at the edges of her vision. "Why are they doing this?" Leo whimpered, his innocent voice cutting the air laden with dread. "It doesn't matter. Just keep moving," Rebecca urged, desperation filtering through her thoughts. Each stride echoed the bone-chilling reality of their situation. There was something wrong. So very wrong, the metallic tang of fear coiled in her stomach as they reached the park entrance. The moon hung above like a silent witness, casting a ghostly glow on the figures standing just beyond the tree line, shadows gathered in a twisted line. They whispered to one another in unholy tones, urgent and rhythmic, as if coaxing the darkness into something corporeal. "Mommy, I can't see," Leo murmured, and Rebecca lost her breath for a moment. The weight of that darkness felt overwhelming. "Stay close, Leo." She couldn't let him fall behind. Not now, not ever. They stumbled through the park, dodging the sinister playtime equipment that loomed like predators waiting for their prey. But when they broke into the clearing, Rebecca froze. Before her stood an eternal circle of thick, gnarled trees, their roots spiraled and twisting, framing an ancient stone altar slightly illuminated by the moonlight, as if inviting them. "Mommy, what is that?" Leo's voice quivered, peering around her. A figure stepped from the shadows, her face blurred and indistinct, but Rebecca felt the suffocating familiarity wash over her. It was a woman who had disappeared from their town years ago, another victim of the darkness. The woman's arms were wide, as if beckoning them. "Join us, Rebecca. We can free you, but you must choose." Rebecca felt the ground swaying beneath her, the air choked with the scent of wet earth and despair. She came back to the nightmare unfolding, the whispers intensifying, clawing at her sanity. It felt as if the trees were closing in, their branches contorting toward them, hungry. "What do we do?" she whispered urgently to herself, fear washing over her. "What choice is there?" "Mommy!" Leo screamed, and the chant escalated, reaching a pitch that reverberated in her skull. Luminous eyes glinted from the underbrush, shadows swelling like living entities around them. "Get away!" she yelled, clutching Leo tighter. But something deep inside her wanted to listen, to join this chorus of despair echoing in her head. Could she afford to cross that boundary? What awaited them on the other side wasn't clear, but one thing was certain: the game was changing. Suddenly, the chanting ceased, and a suffocating silence enveloped them. Rebecca's thoughts spiraled, and she turned to Leo, terrified. "Stay with me, sweetheart," she murmured, and just as she tried to comfort him, the altar pulsed with light, casting eerie shadows across the park. "Make your choice," the voice echoed, chillingly sweet, like poison coated in honey. In that moment, Rebecca knew this was only the beginning of their horror. But could she truly escape? Would she even want to? The seed of darkness had taken root. Would they be able to fight it, or would the darkness claim them forever? A cold wind whipped through the clearing as the altar's light flickered, casting frantic shadows that danced unevenly, creating a macabre performance for an audience of terrified souls. Rebecca blinked against the harsh glow, the warmth of Leo's small hand like a lifeline tied to sanity. But with each pulse of that cursed light, the grip of fear tightened around her heart. "Mommy, I don't like this," Leo cried, his voice a small, fragile sound swallowed by the silence that hung thick as fog. He pressed against her thigh, eyes wide with terror, begging for reassurance that she struggled to provide. "What do you want to do?" whispered the blurred figure, her voice rising like an incantation, echoing in the hollow expanse around them. "We can reunite, become one with the power of the night." Rebecca's breath grew shallow. Dark thoughts flitted through her mind, sinister whispers promising safety if she surrendered. She could already feel the chains of dread tightening, their cold grip inviting her to embrace the shadows, to yield to desires she didn't understand. "No!" she screamed, shaking her head violently as if to dislodge the lies that coiled around her thoughts. "Stay away from us." The rhythmic whispers returned, now laced with a tangible anger that vibrated through the air. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble again, and she could feel the roots of the trees shifting as if in response to her defiance. What did these beings want? Why did they look at her with such longing? Leo's whimper pulled her back from the edge of the cliff of madness. "Mommy, what do they want?" Tiny tears glistened like glass in his eyes, and Rebecca's heart shattered within her chest. "They want to take us, Leo. But we won't let them." Her voice struck with a raw determination she didn't feel but had to project. The chanting resumed, low and threatening, swirling into a cacophony that felt alive, wrapping around them like a snake preparing to strike. The ground pulsed beneath her feet in time with the rhythm of their haunting words, as if the very earth was part of the dark force pulling at her spirit. "What's that?" Leo pointed, his small finger trembling as he stared past her shoulder. She turned, and her stomach dropped. Emerging from the shadows were more figures, more neighbors, friends, and at the forefront stood her own husband, his face contorted with an unspeakable hunger that threatened to consume him. "Join us, Rebecca," he rasped, his voice strained yet pleading. Jason, her heart twisted like a knife. "No. Fight it." But deep down, she felt the strings of her own will tugging. Was he really here or just another illusion meant to drag her under? Whispers filled her mind, beckoning her like the warm embrace of a long-lost love. "Mommy, they're gonna hurt us." Leo screamed, but his terrified plea only strengthened the dark cocoon wrapping around her. With a sudden resolve, Rebecca yanked Leo to her chest, stepping backwards toward the jagged line of trees. But it felt like a trap, an invitation to their horrifying ritual. The altar pulsed brighter, almost insistent, and voices clashed, shouting their defiance, promising freedom from the pain of existence. "Make your choice," the blurred figure sang again, voice weaving in and out like smoke, enticing her to yield. Just as Rebecca felt an overwhelming urge to step forward, a scream pierced the air, breaking the spell. Another neighbor crumpled to the ground, clutching their head, convulsing as if the shadows burned their skin. No! This was the moment to escape, to save Leo. But the altar still beckoned, pulsing with a seductive glow. "Run!" she shouted, and in a flash, they turned to flee back into the suffocating darkness of the park. But the figures surged forward, blocking their path, faces twisting in their monstrous glee. And when she stumbled upon a gnarled root, falling unevenly, dread clenched her throat. As she hit the ground, the shadows closed in, and the last thing she saw was Leo's terrified face before the darkness swallowed them whole. The voice echoed lavishly, mixing with their screams. "Your choice awaits, are you ready?" In that moment, she questioned everything. In separate and suffocating chambers of her mind, Rebecca wrestled with painful thoughts. What lay beyond the altar? What did escape truly mean? But it was too late, the night had claims on them, and as everything blacked out, a chilling laugh lingered, teasing the edges of her consciousness. Would the shadows reveal their secrets? Or would they fall prey to the ultimate darkness? Darkness surrounded them, thick and heavy. Rebecca's eyes struggled to adjust, focused on the small shape clutching her. Leo's whimpers cut through the silence like knives. The shadows, no longer mere figures, clung to the edges of her vision, circling like wolves preying on the weak. "Mommy?" Leo's voice was small, laced with confusion and fear. "We need to find a way out, Leo," she whispered. The darkness felt alive, buzzing with a sinister energy. She pushed herself up, arms shaking, dragging Leo to his feet. "We can't stay here." But where was the way out? The trees loomed grotesquely in the dim light. Their branches twisted and contorted, almost reaching for her, mockingly tracing her every step. Suddenly, a cracking sound pierced through the cold air. Rebecca froze, heart racing. What was that? Leo gasped, and she turned just in time to see the blurred figure materialize again, its form swaying as if caught in a breeze. The whispers grew louder, crashing into her like a wave, every syllable a chilling invitation. "Join us, become part of the night." "No." She recoiled, holding Leo close. "We're not joining you." Every instinct screamed for her to flee. But the darkness stretched infinitely, making escape seem impossible. The ground beneath felt like a living thing, shifting, writhing, as indecipherable shapes moved in the dark, just beyond her reach. "What if they hurt us?" Leo asked, his voice trembling, eyes wide in panic. "We won't let them." Rebecca shouted, but her voice trembled as doubt invaded her spirit. Shadows slithered closer, wrapping around her legs, pulling at her with icy fingers. She fought the feelings of despair, pushing forward. Panic surged as she stumbled forward again, every step heavier as a cold sweat dripped down her spine. Shadows whispered haunting promises, tales of freedom and peace if only they'd surrender. Rebecca felt their claws digging into her mind, and every second was a battle. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement. Figures formed from the misty darkness, her neighbors, friends, now grotesque caricatures of themselves, their eyes hollow and filled with dark voids. Rebecca, another voice joined the chorus, and it was Jason, twisted, hollow, a shell of the man she loved. "Don't fight us. Join us, we can be whole again." She felt her heart wrench. She wanted to believe him, somewhere, she craved that connection. But not like this. "No. I want to do it. Mommy." Leo clutched her tighter, clawing at her shirt, terror palpable between them. "What if they take me? Then we'll fight together." She pushed through the tide of despair, willing steel into her voice. "We'll find a way out." Yet the shadows seemed to swell, filling every space, choking off her breath. The whispers grew into a cacophony, singing promises and threats all at once, a siren's call pulling at the edges of her sanity. One step, then another, she moved forward, heart thundering in her chest, then, up ahead, she spotted something faint and flickering. A glow. An opening. Hope ignited within her. "There." She gasped. "Leo, we can escape." But as they sprinted towards the light, the shadows darted forward, blocking their path, laughter echoing all around them, deep and mocking. Faces twisted in anguish shifted into grotesque smiles. "No escape for you." The ground shook violently, throwing them off balance. Darkness surged like a wave, pulling them back, and in that moment of panic, Rebecca knew they were not alone. Something darker than before lurked within the shadows, something that hungered. "Run." She pushed Leo forward, each breath heavy with dread, and as they took off, she felt the pain of every shadow reach for her, clawing at her mind. They couldn't give in. Not now. With every ounce of strength, she willed them closer to the light. And just when they thought they'd reach it, a deafening roar erupted from behind, chilling her blood. "Join us." Her pulse raced, the darkness closed in. Would they be lost forever in the night? Would the shadows finally win? As that thought crashed in her mind, she turned to face the abyss, suddenly. aware of another presence, something warm and overwhelming. Was it a hallucination, another trick? Or something real? The shadows shifted again, circling tighter. The glow remained ahead, a solitary promise. But there was something in Rebecca's heart that wasn't ready to yield. Was the sacrifice worth it? "Hold on, Leo!" she yelled one last time. But a thunderous crack ripped through the air, and the ground split open, swallowing their hopes, dragging them into the void. In that moment, she had to ask herself the one burning question: what awaits them down below, in the depths of despair? And as they plunged into the unknown, the darkness reached for them, laden with promises and threats. The night was far from over. The fall felt endless. Darkness engulfed them, swallowing every glimmer of hope as the ground rushed to meet them. Rebecca's heart pounded against her ribcage, each beat a desperate reminder that they were alive, even as the void closed in around them. She grasped Leo tightly, the warmth of his small body anchoring her to reality amidst the overwhelming chaos. Just when the impact seemed inevitable, they landed with an earth-shattering thud, a force that knocked the breath out of her. Dazed, Rebecca blinked against the darkness, struggling to regain her senses. The air was thick, and a sour smell filled her nostrils like rotting leaves, clinging to her throat. "Mommy, where are we?" Leo's voice cracked, a whimper echoing in the void. I don't know," she murmured, forcing herself to steady her breathing. The darkness felt weightier here, wrapping around them like an unyielding shroud. "Stay close." With a hesitance that made her skin crawl, she began to rise, feeling the jagged ground shift beneath her feet. They stood in a cavernous space, walls wet and glistening with darkness. The air vibrated with an unsettling hum, a frequency that set every nerve in Rebecca's body on edge. "Rebecca," a whisper slithered up from the shadows, the voice dripping with malice. It sent icy spikes down her spine. "Don't you want to be with us?" She turned sharply, searching for the source. Flickering shapes danced just out of reach, taunting her with their silence. "No. We're not joining you," she shouted, clenching Leo's hand tighter. But in the stillness, the whispers grew into a haunting song, drawing out the painful memories of a life she once cherished. Jason's face hovered in her mind, filled with warmth and laughter, now twisted into something grotesque, a mockery of love. "Be free, Rebecca. Be with us forever." Panic surged. The faces from the darkness pulled at her heart, at her memories. Leo tugged at her shirt, sensing her fear. "Mommy, I'm scared," he murmured. "What if they get us? Then we fight." She turned, gathering strength from her son's trembling voice. "We're going to find a way out of here. I promise." Gathering her resolve, she stepped forward, the ground crunching beneath her. A flicker of light beckoned in the distance. "Look, Leo," she pointed. "That way." They moved cautiously, the flickering growing brighter, illuminating more of the cavern. Shadows crept along the walls, a sinister ballet of forms that rippled as if they were alive. The whispers became a frightening choir, pressing against her ears, urging her to turn back, to give in. Then something lunged from the darkness. A figure, a man, no, a beast, half-formed from the night's essence. It was Jason, or what remained of him, eyes hollow and teeth bared in a twisted grin. "Why do you fight?" he crooned, voice a lullaby turned deadly. "It would be so easy to join us. Embrace the darkness. You'll never be alone again. Get away." She lunged, a primal scream escaping her lips, dragging Leo behind her. The shadows writhed, closing in, and those ghastly faces began merging into a single pulsating mass. Her heart raced, fear clawing at her insides. They stumbled back towards the light, but it flickered erratically, a dying ember. With one sudden push, she launched herself and Leo forward, desperate to reach that glow. A deep rumble echoed, and suddenly, the shadows surged, coalescing around them, tightening their grip. "You won't escape us," they hissed, dominating her thoughts, and in that chaotic moment, doubt crept in again. "Leo! Run!" she shouted, pushing him through the light. As he jumped, she felt the shadows pull at her ankles, dragging her back with an unrelenting grip. She clawed towards her son, fighting against the suffocating dark. The last thing she saw before being yanked into the void was Leo's terrified face as he reached out for her. And then everything went black. Rebecca drifted in that abyss, no sound, no light. Only silence. A faraway echo taunted her from the depths. Join us, become whole again. What had she sacrificed? What awaited her in this inescapable void? As the chilling realization settled in, a faint shimmer broke through the darkness, twisting and turning, beckoning her with yet another choice. The night had deepened even further. Rebecca gasped, the darkness pulling at her like icy fingers trying to drag her under. She surged forward, heart pounding wildly in her chest. The shimmer was a flash of hope, illuminating a path that twisted and squirmed like a snake. "Leo!" she screamed, her voice swallowed by the void. The silence that answered felt heavy, a weight that pressed against her soul. Panic clenched her throat. She couldn't lose him. Not like this. The shimmering intensified, revealing eerie images flickering at the edges of her vision. Faces she recognized but twisted with torment. Friends. Family. All trapped in perpetual horror. "Mommy." The sweet voice she adored echoed faintly, each syllable a dagger driving deeper into her heart. She blinked, fighting the tears that stung her eyes. "Leo." The shimmer expanded, and then it flickered again, threatening to vanish. "Keep moving," she whispered to herself, a frantic chant. The light beckoned, pulsing with urgency, and she pushed through the thick, oppressive air, drawing closer. Suddenly, from the depths, an outstretched hand emerged. Long fingers, skeletal and grotesque, clawed toward her. "You can't escape, Rebecca. You are one of us now." The voice was a chorus of her worst fears, the whispers having morphed into a single entity, hollow and menacing. Desperation clawed at her. "No. We're not like you." With each stride, the ground shifted beneath her feet. The path twisted in unexpected ways, almost alive, as Rebecca felt her reality tearing apart. Memories of laughter and love wove through the shadows, pulsating with the sinister energy of the place. She wavered, caught between the darkness pulling her closer and the sliver of light urging her onward. "Join us, be free." The voices rose again, filling the air like smoke, wrapping around her throat tighter with every word. "Shut up!" she screamed, clutching her head. The echoes pounded against her skull, but she pressed on, her heart a relentless drumbeat against the nightmare. The light spread close enough to illuminate the contours of a face at the edge of her vision. "Mommy." Leo appeared, his small frame illuminated by the surreal glow. He stood still, eyes wide with fear, surrounded by twisting shadows. What was once her son was now an extension of this hellish landscape. His face was framed by a darkness that threatened to engulf him. "No! No!" she cried, desperation erupting into pure terror. She lunged toward him, the shimmer of light pulsing brightly. But the entities were faster. They coiled around her legs, forcing her down. "This is where you belong," they hissed, their breath cold against her skin. She felt their presence, heavy and suffocating, sinking into her with every breath. She caught Leo's gaze again, a mix of hope and fear mirrored in his eyes. "Help me, Mommy." Tears streamed down her face, the pain in her chest growing heavier. "I'm coming," she yelled, pulling against the dark tendrils that wrapped around her. Giving it all she had, she shot forward, just as the light flickered violently, threatening to plunge them both back into the abyss. The walls of the cavern seemed to throb around her. The voices crescendoed, shrieking her name, echoing in a twisted symphony of despair. She could feel her sanity unraveling, but the flicker of her son's face ignited her fury. "No!" she roared, defiance wrapping her in a fiery shield. She was not just a vessel for their torment. She was a mother. With one last desperate surge, she reached for the light, the connection between her and Leo unraveling the darkness like threads of doom. As she closed in, the light enveloped her completely, blinding her eyes. A crack of energy surged through her, and for a brief moment, she felt the warmth of life before everything collapsed again. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of hate and fear. She felt the pull of reality shift again, twisting them, her, Leo, and the darkness into a new and terrifying dimension, a space where horror painted every moment in shades of utter dread. Then came silence once more, heavy and stifling. Was it over? Or was this just the beginning of another nightmare? The oppression clung to her, suffocating. And there, a new light flickered. Not the same warm glow, but a chilling, electric pulse. Where are we now? It felt like a question asked from everywhere and nowhere. Rebecca's breath hitched in her throat. What had she let in? Terror crawled back into her mind, and she realized they weren't alone. The flickering light pulsed around them, casting twisted shadows that clawed at Rebecca's sanity. She felt Leo's grip tighten around her hand, his small body trembling against her leg. A fresh wave of determination surged within her. They had fought too hard, faced too much, to surrender now. Whatever happens, Leo, we stay together. She urged, her voice shaky yet firm. The darkness seemed to respond, reacting like a living thing. It thickened and shifted, eager and hungry. But she wouldn't let it claim them. Slowly, the shimmering aura expanded, illuminating what lay beyond the oppressive veil. Rebecca could see figures emerging from the dark depths ahead, just shadows at first, but then their faces crystallized in her mind, friends, neighbors, and a visage she couldn't bear to look at, Jason. The air turned rancid with betrayal, the smell of decay pricked at her senses. Mommy, they're here, Leo murmured, clutching at her as the figures shuffled closer, their eyes wide yet empty, filled with a voracious hunger that sent a chill up her spine. They were trapped in their own despair, and now they sought someone to join their ranks. Stay behind me, Leo. She commanded, stepping forward to protect him, equal parts brave and terrified. You don't need to listen to them. The procession of familiar faces loomed closer, words spilling from their lips as if they were reciting a twisted mantra. Join us, Rebecca, join us forever. She couldn't take it anymore. Rebecca turned to Leo, whose wide innocent eyes reflected everything she feared but also a flicker of hope. At that moment, all she could think about was their bond, not just mother and son, but warriors against the dark. Leo. We will escape this. We will fight. She declared, her voice rising above the spectral chorus. The chanting grew louder, a cacophony spinning around her, a dissonant harmony that felt like claws scratching at her mind. Desperation threatened to swallow her whole. Then came the surge of resolve. Rage at this hellish prison, rage against the shadows that wanted to consume them all. Let them go. She yelled, eyes blazing at the advancing figures. They're not yours. They're more than your shadows. The air shimmered, as though her words bore weight. Random whispers fell silent, the faces around her momentarily flickering, their expressions contorting into surprise, perhaps fear of their own. Without thinking, Rebecca embraced the energy coiling around her, channeling it into one courageous act. No! A violent roar erupted from the twisted mass of neighbors, and the air crackled with energy. In a moment of defiance, Rebecca pulled Leo to her, enveloped by a wash of intense brightness. Hold on! She shouted, feeling the fabric of the reality stretch and strain. The cavern erupted into chaos, shadows lunged at them, desperate to reclaim their grip, but Rebecca felt the warmth of their shared bond fortifying her resolve. We won't let them take us. She screamed. The blinding light flickered, then flared as they surged forward, propelling themselves through the clutches of darkness. With each step, the shadows bellowed in frustration, a cacophony of rage that rang hollow. Behind them, Jason's figure melted into the void, a reminder of the twisted fate she refused. The flickering light turned into a blinding glare, pulling her closer to a shimmering threshold just ahead. "Keep going." Leo's voice rang like a bell of hope as they broke through, the shadows grasping at the hem of her shirt, clawing at the light that now enveloped them. And then, as swiftly as it had begun, it ended. With a shattering pulse, they burst into another realm, a vivid world drenched in golden hues. The fresh air was vibrant, spangled with warmth and embrace of life itself. Rebecca gasped and fell to her knees, breathing in the air thick with cherished memories. Around them, the horror of the night faded with the last whisper of darkness. It was a sanctuary laden with sound, laughter of children playing, the distant chirp of birds, the soothing rustle of leaves, untainted by fear. "Mommy?" Leo whispered, eyes darting through the vibrant scene. "Leo, look!" She pointed, laughter bubbling in her chest as they saw their neighbors smiling, normal, completely untouched by the terror of the night. A gentle breeze revitalized the warmth surrounding them. In that moment, Rebecca knew they had escaped. The sacrifice wasn't in vain, her defiance against darkness had forged their way to freedom. "It's over," she breathed, drawing Leo into a tight embrace. "We made it." As they stood together, watching life pour back into their neighborhood, a realization washed over Rebecca: they were free, but the memory of that night would tether her forever. A line had been crossed, a battle fought, one that cemented the bond between them but also the resilience she never knew she had. And so, in the embrace of daylight, she and her son turned to walk away from the shadows. A new warmth surrounded them, hope illuminating their path now, a promise of healing, but lingering in the corners of her mind was a quiet murmur, a reminder that darkness can never be entirely banished, waiting merely for the next curious soul to tug at its veil. This story doesn't end here. It's a promise to return, a tale of courage, resilience, and the unyielding strength of love. So, before you go, take action now. You need to subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Every click matters. Flood the comments section below with your reactions and wild theories about this conclusion. We want to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion. Join the community and become part of our journey together.